Before Trevor even said a single word publicly, long before he finally let the world peek into the wound he had kept stitched shut for almost 10 years, his family already knew something was off. They weren't loud about it. They didn't create drama. They simply watched. They watched him pour every last drop of loyalty, time, energy, and heart into a woman who deep down wasn't pouring the same back, and his family felt it before he ever admitted it. They saw a shift that Trevor, blinded by love, refused to recognize. The warmth wasn't matching, the respect wasn't balanced, the love wasn't growing in the same direction. Trevor was twisting himself into knots for a marriage that was slowly slipping out of his hands, and his family quietly stepped back, not because they disliked Meghan, not because they were petty or judgmental, but because something felt wrong, something unspoken. They sensed that Trevor was loving with both hands, while Meghan was holding the relationship with just her fingertips. And then came the truth that cracked everything open, a confession Meghan allegedly shared behind closed doors. The kind of confession that flips a marriage upside down and silently begins its end. Before Prince Harry, before the titles, before the spotlight and the reinvention, Meghan was just a woman standing in front of the man she promised forever to. And according to people who were right there in Trevor's inner circle, she told him something that punched a hole through their future. She allegedly said she could not have children. This wasn't a casual revelation. For Trevor, it was life-altering. Building a family was part of their dream, part of the life he had imagined with her, but he didn't argue. He didn't accuse her of anything. He didn't push or question. He accepted, because that's the kind of man he was. If the woman he loved said this was their path, then that was their path. He reshaped their future around her words. He carried that truth without resentment, without complaint, because he believed her, trusted her, and honored her. Honesty. And then, years later, Meghan had 2 children with Prince Harry. Trevor wasn't furious, according to those close to him. He was shattered, confused to his core. That one piece of information, the one he had built their entire future around, suddenly looked like a painful mystery. Was it something she believed at the time? Was it something she told only him? Or was it something she used because she already knew she wouldn't be building a family with Trevor? The questions dug into him. And in that confusion, his family's early discomfort made sense. The emotional imbalance. The subtle withdrawal. The feeling that Trevor was dedicated to someone who had emotionally checked out long before he realized it. That confession had been the first crack, but what happened afterwards is what split the marriage apart completely. Trevor is not the kind of man who waves his love around with big declarations. He shows it through effort, through consistency, and during the early stages of Meghan's career, when she landed Suits and moved to Toronto, he became her support system. He flew out constantly, juggling his own tight production schedules just to be near her. He sent care packages, called during breaks, explored ways to shift parts of his work so he could be closer. He invested everything. But the more he leaned in, the more she leaned out. Not in dramatic ways, not with shouting or arguments. No, it was subtle, quiet, almost strategic, like she was slowly stepping out of the room every time he stepped in. Her priorities were climbing upward, toward success, toward new circles, new people, new dreams, and Trevor wasn't part of that climb. Everyone saw it. Her friends, his friends, their families. Trevor felt it, but he didn't want to believe it. The marriage started to look like a seesaw stuck on one side, Trevor holding the weight while Meghan floated somewhere else entirely. He was trying, adjusting, bending, holding on, but she had already started moving past him. Her world grew, her career rose, and Trevor's place in her life shrunk without warning. It was no longer 2 people building a life, it was Trevor building, and Meghan preparing her exit, and then came the silence. The coldest ending Trevor could have imagined. After nearly a decade together, Meghan didn't ask for a conversation, didn't sit down and explain, didn't even call him. No closure, no explanation. She mailed back her wedding ring, a package, no note, no words, just a ring. The symbol of everything they promised suddenly dropped into his reality like it meant nothing. Opening that package was like having the air sucked out of his chest. People close to him said that moment hit harder than any argument ever could, because it wasn't just an ending, it was erasure. It was proof that she had mentally left him long before the ring appeared at his door. His family suddenly understood everything. The early unease, the emotional distance, the feeling that Trevor was holding on to a woman who was already halfway through the door. That ring wasn't just a breakup, it was confirmation that their relationship had been collapsing quietly for years. And then, for years, Trevor said nothing. Not to the press, not to friends outside his small circle. He rebuilt. He healed quietly. He stayed silent until something finally pushed him past his silence. Something surreal. Something that reframed everything. According to whispers from people close to him, Meghan allegedly had a vision board long before she ever met Prince Harry, and right in the center of it was Harry. Not as an innocent celebrity crush, not as a fantasy, but as a plan, a target, a blueprint. She had studied the royal family, charted a path, visualized a future that had nothing to do with Trevor. Not fate, not a magical blind date, a mission. When Trevor heard this, everything clicked. All the confusion, the distance, the sudden emotional cutoff. She wasn't drifting toward mystery, she was moving toward a plan she had already drawn. He had simply been a chapter she needed to turn the page. Then came the detail that stunned even those who had defended her for years. When Meghan met Harry for the very first time, she allegedly wore Princess Diana's favorite perfume, a scent Harry recognized instantly. A scent tied deeply to grief, love, childhood memories, and loss. To Harry, it felt like destiny. To Meghan's insiders, it felt like calculation. She knew scent triggers emotion. She knew that memory could create attachment. And in the heart of a man still grieving his mother, that familiar scent wasn't coincidence, it was impact. Harry didn't just fall for Meghan, he fell for the moment she created. The emotional thread she pulled so softly, he didn't even feel it happening. And when Trevor learned this, he saw that same quiet intentionality he had felt during their marriage just magnified onto a global stage. But the cracks didn't just hit Meghan, they hit Harry. According to sources inside the Montecito mansion, Harry was shaken. For years, he defended Meghan against everyone, the palace, the press, the world. But this time, the voice wasn't coming from tabloids, it was coming from the man who knew her before the reinvention. The man who had nothing to gain by speaking. The man whose words were harder to dismiss than any headline. Insiders whispered that Harry withdrew, fell quiet, tried to process everything privately. He wasn't angry, he was confused. Torn between loyalty to Meghan and the possibility that there were parts of her he never truly knew. One source claimed Harry finally said something that hinted at the beginning of a shift. Stop blaming the palace for everything. That wasn't anger. That was exhaustion. That was doubt. That was the unraveling of a narrative Meghan had built for years. And while this storm grew, Meghan's schedule suddenly emptied. Events canceled, panels canceled, public appearances wiped from calendars, because she knew what the first question from reporters would be, and she had no safe answer. Meghan, who once stood boldly before cameras, retreated into silence. And that silence didn't read as strength this time. It read as fear, as strategy collapsing, as a brand cracking. People who once supported her began revisiting old interviews with suspicion, even the emotional ones, the tear-filled ones, wondering what was authentic and what was performance. And meanwhile, whispers from Trevor's side said something even more shocking. He hasn't revealed everything. What the world heard so far, only a small portion. He allegedly held back the most damaging parts out of restraint or respect. But with Meghan trying to silence him so aggressively, he might not hold back much longer. A memoir has been hinted. A second interview, and this time with receipts. Everything she built, every image, every statement, every carefully shaped moment relied on one thing: the belief that no one from her past would ever speak. But Trevor spoke. And now the truth is slipping into the light. Slowly, steadily, inevitably. Because in Hollywood, reinvention is survival. In royalty, reinvention is rebellion. But in real life, reinvention hits a wall when the truth finally steps forward. And Trevor's truth is now standing in her path. Not loud, not dramatic, not vengeful, simply real, simply lived, simply undeniable. And now the world is asking a question Meghan cannot spin, charm, or control. If Trevor finally spoke, who might be next? The dominoes have started falling, and once the first falls, the rest never stay standing. And the more Trevor's quiet truth spreads, the more the public begins connecting dots. Meghan never expected anyone to connect. People who once dismissed every rumor as jealousy or tabloid noise are suddenly looking back at her timeline, her choices, her interviews, and realizing the pattern had been hiding in plain sight. It wasn't just the way she exited her first marriage. It wasn't just the mail, the ring moment. It was how every chapter of her life seemed to close the moment something bigger, shinier, or more strategic appeared on the horizon. For years, Meghan built an image rooted in hardship, in struggle, in being misunderstood, an image she made the world believe. But Trevor's voice, steady and unembellished, cracked through that image like a hairline fracture spreading through glass. Because Trevor has nothing to gain. He's not chasing fame. He's not asking for cameras or sympathy. He's a man who stayed silent for nearly a decade until the truth became too heavy to keep buried. And that is what makes his words dangerous. Credibility is louder than any headline, and authenticity, real authenticity, cannot be staged. People within her old social circles are now whispering too. Not loudly, not publicly, but enough to stir curiosity. Enough to make reporters dig into the years before. Royalty. Enough to make former colleagues re-examine moments they once brushed off. That is the real storm Meghan is facing, not the palace, not the press, but the past. A past she never expected to resurface, especially from someone as private as Trevor. Meanwhile, sources say Harry is caught in the emotional crossfire, trying to protect his family while quietly wondering whether the woman he fell for had been wearing a mask the entire time. Not a mask of malice, but a mask of survival, ambition, planning, and that thought alone is tearing him in two. Because if even a sliver of Trevor's quiet revelations hold truth, then Harry would have to confront the possibility that his greatest love story may have been shaped long before it began. And that is the thought Meghan fears the most. Not the public turning on her, not the headlines, but Harry questioning her, Harry pulling away, Harry seeing the cracks she fought so hard to hide. Because once a partner begins asking questions, the answers rarely stay buried for long. Meghan's silence, once her shield, is quickly becoming her spotlight. Every canceled appearance, every sudden retreat, every carefully worded schedule, adjustment only fuels more suspicion. Because people don't run from lies, they run from truths that threaten to spill. And right now, the truth is chasing her.